Chair Freiberg moves House File 3862 before the committee.
Thank you, and just for members' awareness, the intent is to lay this bill over.
Okay. Okay, to your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So this bill
Oh, actually, do you have a DE? Do you want to move the DE first?
Yes, I will move the DE.
Okay.
So the DE puts the bill in the shape I would like. It takes into account some suggestions, I believe, from the revisor's office and other stakeholders.
Okay. Well, is there discussion on the DE1? Okay. Well, all in favor of the DE1, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the DE1 is adopted. All right. Sorry, Chair Freiberg. To your bill.
Thank you. So this bill would create a Minnesota voter information guide to be published by the Office of the Secretary of State before each statewide general election. A recent two-part study conducted by the Office of the Secretary of State found that Minnesotans want more information about candidates and how to vote. 32 states already provide voter guides with key details like polling locations, early voting locations, and hours, eligibility, and ballot questions. Most also allow candidates to share information in their own words. The bill includes the when, where, and how of voting in addition to candidate statements from candidates for federal offices, statewide, state offices, state legislative, and judicial races. It ensures accessibility through both an online guide and a printed version mailed to households with registered voters. I believe I have some testifiers here from the Office of the Secretary of State to provide some more information.
Please state your name and your affiliation for the record.
Madam Chair, thank you. Jonah Rothstein, Office of the Secretary of State.
All right.
Thank you, Chair Freiberg, for your partnership on this bill. In 2024 and 2025, the office conducted a voter study. During that process, we heard from Minnesotans that they are seeking more information about their candidates for office at all levels. Minnesota has the benefit of not being the first state to look at doing a voter guide. 32 states offer some form of a voter information guide for their citizens prior to even-year general elections. All of these guides include basic information on voting, who is eligible to vote, where they can vote and when, and what offices are on the ballot. Most state voter guides also include candidate statements and a few basic biographical questions from candidates. Minnesota is in the minority of states, 18 states, that do not offer a voter information guide. And while the Office of the Secretary of State and local election officials offer a plethora of information to voters online, we do not have a single product that is distributed to all registered voters. This bill reflects what the office learned from conversations with other states, learning from their best practices, costs, and voter preferences. And the office looks forward to hearing your feedback on this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members.
All right. So I don't have anyone else on the agenda, but are there members of the audience here who would like to testify on the bill? Oh, okay. Oh, so Ms. Freeman is available for questions. Great. So seeing nobody else here, I guess we're open it up for member discussion. Representative Roach.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Is there a fiscal note on this?
Chair Freiberg.
Yes, there is. I want to say it wasn't very much in the current biennium is the good news. In the in the tails, it was a little bit more. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of $2 million, and that is part of the reason this is being laid over at the moment. I do think it serves an important purpose in voter education, though, and I think it's worthy of starting a discussion this year.
Representative Roach.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not necessarily, I mean, as far as the cost goes, I think it's, a little crazy, and I think people have to do their own, be responsible for being informed on their own. I would be more inclined to have something that, is online, that's easier to access, that would cost a heck of a lot less money than, $2 million, for a bunch of prints, but just my 2 cents on it.
Okay, Chair Freiberg, or
Madam Chair, Representative Roach, that's certainly something we're open to discussion on. So thank you.
Vice Chair Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess my question was kind of on the same lines, but if you have considered, we get a lot of mail, a lot of junk mail that just, gets recycled right away. And if you would consider, because as it was written right now, right, that it was to be mailed out? And so would you consider, doing something that's more of like a digital, so it's less expensive? It just seems like a lot of people, this is going to get thrown in the, recycling container.
Chair Freiberg.
Yeah, I would consider it. There are some reasons I know that a mailed version is preferable, and I think Nicole Freeman from the Office of the Secretary of State can provide a little more background on that, too.
Sure. Ms. Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Representative Altendorf, Nicole Freeman from the Office of the Secretary of State. What we've learned from research and in talking with other states and why we put together this proposal in coordination with Chair Freiberg is that we've heard from other states that while they might have an online version, there were states that moved from a printed version to an online version, and they only received 20,000 clicks on that guide in a state where millions of voters exist. And so we have also heard from folks who have made different shifts over the years, from other states, not folks, but other states who have made shifts from over the years, and they hear about from their voters how much they use the printed guide. They're seeing people bring it into the polling place with them. And so I think while I definitely recognize the volume of mail that folks get at their houses, we were, I think, a little bit surprised to hear the popularity of the printed guides in other states, and heard the feedback from states where they made a shift to just online only, and that people really did miss that physical version of it. And so that's where we put this proposal together.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Freeman. And, Vice Chair Altendorf.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. And, just appreciate you bringing it. I know you said we're going to lay it over, but it's interesting. I just have not heard of this concept before, but it's good to see what the other states are doing. Thank you.
Chair Qualm, did you want to comment on this? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was, looking at the fiscal note. This appears to like it would be a multi-page document, so there's printing and et cetera. The current cost for mailing out to, 1 million people is not trivial. One thought is, like they're saying, they've got the postcard with the online, or maybe having some stuff available with a local county and et cetera, because you're making a general thing, across the state, so that's a lot of stuff that's being done. And I just think the costs are pretty high, plus we do have people registering with not real mail addresses, so you're mailing out to a non-real address. And so you're going to have automatically so much go into, recycling. I think there's a lot more thought that could be done to make this easier or have stuff available. But if you're going to send something out and you had a place where there were documentation at, the county or the city, you could have on the postcard, which has a special lower rate. It just seems as if it's well, this would be great. I don't think the details have been reviewed sufficiently to remove, some of the waste and also make things more specific, because if you have to wade through a bunch of stuff, oftentimes people will just, toss it. But you get something that's designed for your area. Like right now, going to the Secretary of State's site, you can put in your zip or address and boom, you have that information. And so if you want to have printed, I would do the partnership with the counties, which are part of the activity for voting. So, I'm glad it's laid over and I'm sure we can work to have better informed and more focused information. Thank you.
Chair Freiberg, or Ms. Freeman, perhaps you could explain if the voter guides would educate voters about local elections and local races, and what that might look like.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Right now, the voter guide would include information on how to vote, where to vote, when to vote, and details about what offices might appear on an individual's ballot. This bill would include offices, so all federal offices, statewide offices, state legislative races, as well as judicial races. It wouldn't, at this stage in this bill, wouldn't go any sort of lower on the ballot than that, but would include information about what offices might appear on someone's ballot. And in the bill, it doesn't prescribe exactly how we would break down the guide from a geographical area, but that is something that I think would be further looked into and discussed, and then would be something that would be decided and put in through the rulemaking process to ensure that whatever guide is put out, to Representative Quam's point, yes, we want it to be a guide that is usable for folks, that it's not, a phone book being shipped around the state. And so that's something that the office would continue those conversations with folks across the state to figure out what the right balance would be.
Great. Representative McDonald.
Madam Chair, Representative Freiberg, the idea has some good merit. I'm glad it's being laid over so we can continue to discuss this. I particularly like on page 5, section 7, requiring photographs and a recent photograph as well. I think that's a very good thing for local photographers. You got to see what this person looks like before you vote for him. So I think informed citizenry is very important. Our founding fathers thought that to be the case and put that into many, I think it was Thomas Jefferson in his writings. Perhaps a QR code would be good on this too, if your language would require a QR code, because some people perhaps get the piece in the mail and they don't have time to go through it, but they certainly have time to scan it, and maybe they want to read it later. Some of their Gen Zs or Gen Xs or whatever generation likes to do that on their phone. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I could vote for this if the Secretary of State's office would say, you know what, we're going to cut $2 million somewhere in our budget to pay for this each year going forward. I think that would be a good trade-off. I think a piece of mail, I don't call it junk mail as a business person to get my information to a consumer via a hard copy, because we live in this realm of digital on our screens, is a good thing. And the better informed the individual, the voter, the better our democracy will be. I think your third parties already send out flyers, right? MCCL sends out flyers to people in my district, to my voters, and other organizations, other corporations with dark money are sending out flyers and literature to each resident to vote on. So I just give it some merit. I'm not speaking against it. I think that this is something that we could discuss, and maybe the Secretary of State's office would be open to, hey, we'll cut $2 million out of our budget somewhere, and we'll add this every year and send this out to the voters. But I would recommend adding the QR code to this. Any response to that, Mr. Chair?
Chair Freiberg.
Yeah, thank you, Representative McDonald, Vice Chair Lee. Yeah, I think the idea of a QR code is certainly a good one, and I'm open to that. It seems like a nice addition.
Madam Chair, yes. Would the Secretary of State's office like to respond to my fantastic idea on how to pay for this?
You may, or you may decide not to respond to. That's okay.
I guess what I will say is I understand the bill is being laid over, and happy to have conversations offline about how it's funded. Thanks.
Okay. Representative Roach.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple other, and I don't want to belabor the point, but a couple other concerns I may have is, specifically on the print side, as we saw last year, I don't know if many recall, but in an election, there were ballots that were misprinted with the wrong, there was a Republican that was, on the ballot said that they were a Democrat. And so my fear is what would happen and what the cost associated would be if there was a misprint on the paper, right? I mean, that's a lot of cost. I have another concern about the candidate statements. It sounds like someone can just write an essay up to 100 words versus, specific questions. And then thirdly, there's a party preference which states must list the political party affiliation or political principle. So instead of saying you were, part of the DFL, you could say I'm a principled conservative. Right? And so I think the way the language is written, it leaves it up for ambiguity and maybe some potential evading of truth and not giving out full information of who that individual may be and what party they represent. And if you look at websites like I think it's Ballotpedia, I think they do a pretty good job of being nonpartisan, getting information out to voters. And so my third comment would be would the Secretary of State's office just be willing to work with and share a link to an outside organization that already has an infrastructure that they can then just share to candidates?
Chair Freiberg.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there was a lot there. I know in the question about misprints, that's a good question, and interesting comparison about that ballot from the last election cycle. I know the intention is to hire temporary employees to thoroughly review the guide for any sort of potential error like that before it goes out. But certainly, if there have been examples of that happening in the other states that have a voter guide like this, I'd certainly be interested in hearing from Mr. Rothstein or Ms. Freeman. To the point, okay, there were about 4 questions there. I'm just trying to remember them all. To the point about the party principle, I think that's consistent with other statutes. I think Mr. Rothstein could maybe speak to that one.
Mr. Rothstein.
Madam Chair, Representative Roach, the intention there would be to reflect what a candidate puts on their affidavit of candidacy.
Okay. If I.
I guess, yeah, we can go back to Representative Roach.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I just see it says political party affiliation or political principle. So I guess what's the terminology of political principle and what is that referring to, I guess? Because for me, I interpreted it as I'm not going to say I'm a Republican or a Democrat. I'm just going to say I'm a principled conservative.
Ms. Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Roach. So the political principle is something that an individual that's filing as a minor party or someone who's not running under a major party label can put on their affidavit of candidacy. And so that, again, would be based on what folks are currently allowed to do, whether they're filing with an affidavit of candidacy or a nominating petition. So I think how other offices have done it is they take their candidate filing information and use that as sort of the shell, and then are adding in information from the candidates directly, and things like that. So that's an example of how others have dealt with, what should be plugged into those sort of general biographical information spots.
And so, Ms. Freeman, what happens, I guess, after a primary, right? When I guess my question is if you win the Republican primary and you run as a Republican, right? Or how would that impact how someone is labeled?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So that individual, the folks that are running in that primary would have said that they affiliated with the Republican Party or the Democratic Farmer Labor Party or whatever other, but those 2 parties as major parties in Minnesota currently. And so then they would appear then in the general election guide under that party.
Great. Is there further member discussion on the bill? Okay. Oh,
Sorry.
Representative Roach.
Okay, yeah. I was just wondering if Ms. Freeman could maybe comment on whether or not the Secretary of State's office would be willing to just share the link of an organization like Ballotpedia that I think most people would probably sit here and say that they seem to be non-biased and just put out information of candidates. So I think if the point is just trying to get information to voters, why create the infrastructure and put money behind it when there's already an entity there that we can just redistribute?
Chair Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Roach. I knew there was a part I wanted to speak to because there were a few questions there, and that was one of them. You know, I mean, I'm certainly open to discussions about including a link to some other source. I don't exactly, I mean, as far as I know as well, Ballotpedia is fine. I don't know exactly what their methodology is, or if they're like a Wikipedia type thing where anybody can add in any information. So just linking to it as a matter of, I don't know. I guess I just want to be sure about what sort of methodology any organization uses, whether it's them or anybody else, before kind of giving it the government stamp of approval. And I don't know if Ms. Freeman or Mr. Rothstein have any additional point on that.
Ms. Freeman.
I would just, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Roach. I would just say we currently do publish on, it appears both on the sample ballot as well as in the candidate filings, if a candidate provides their own website. And candidates can update that information either with our office or with their local filing officer at any point throughout the election. And so we do have those websites so that, yes, that is the way that the way that voters right now, in addition to their own, Googling and researching, could get information directly from the candidates.
Representative Roach, are you good? Okay. So, I mean, I know I'm chairing, but I would like to just tell the committee, I mean, so Ballotpedia and some of those websites just take information that is self-reported from candidates. And so, if we are concerned about, whether people are, misrepresenting their political party or whatever, like, I think we should really, think twice about what we read online. I think the idea of a non-biased, non-partisan guide is actually really important. As we know, the internet has exploded, and right, like, you can't believe everything that you read on the internet these days. And like Chair Freiberg pointed out, people should be questioning what the methodology is when you're reading these, purported voter guides. We have a good public radio station, NPR, which sometimes publishes voter guides for people, and also that information is self-reported by candidates. So it's a what's the word? It's whatever is submitted by the candidate, right? I think the concern here that hasn't been brought up is the digital divide. I like the idea of providing a website in addition to mailers. There are many places in Minnesota where internet connectivity is not always a guarantee. There are members of the legislature who had problems, tuning into session and tuning in to vote during COVID. And so this is why having mailed out information is really important. There are precincts in Minnesota which only vote by mail. That is like the only way that they actually participate in the democratic process. And so, it's not that, we're just mailing things out. Like, I really do appreciate the idea of using digital voter guides. But this is a really important service that we should have. I used to live in a place that provided a service like this, and it was actually really important because I didn't know that there were all these other positions and all these other people running for office. And so I appreciate Chair Freiberg bringing this forward and trying to provide information to voters in a non-biased way, right? In a world where we're always bombarded with information and people don't have time to figure out if what they're reading is true or not. So thank you. Closing remarks, Chair Freiberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee, for the robust discussion. With the number of bills on the agenda, I wasn't thinking we'd have this much time, so I really appreciate it. You've given me a lot to think about as we continue this discussion. I do think it's an important one to have, and it serves an important role in the states that have it to keep voters informed, and appreciate members' consideration. And with that, I guess I will just can I lay the bill over from here, or should you do it?
I think it doesn't matter. The bill's laid over, so.